Welcome to Season 4 of Transforming 45. I'm your host, Lisa Boat, and this season we're stepping fully into our power. The heat, the hormones, the heartbreak, the healing. This is midlife, raw and redefined. Each episode, you'll hear stories of humans who are rewriting the rules, reclaiming their bodies, their desires, their voices. This is where we stop shrinking, start shining, and remember who the hell we are. Because midlife isn't a crisis, it's an awakening. Let's get transforming 45. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of Transforming 45. From the pre-conversation we were having, I know this is going to be a great conversation. So I am really excited to welcome Mr. Tafiq Akhir. He is a certified award-winning and internationally recognized menopause and healthy aging strategist, best-selling author, and host of the Mr. Menopause Show, now entering its third season. He holds nationally and internationally recognized certifications in menopause education, hormone health, nutrition, and wellness, and is a proud member of the Menopause Society. Every program, presentation, and resource he creates is built on evidence-based knowledge, practical strategies, and empathy. They are designed to help women stop second-guessing and start moving forward with clarity and confidence. So important and not an easy task. So welcome to the show. I'm so glad that you're here today.
Thank you for having me on. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. All right. So tell me, who are you and how did life introduce you to this very interesting version?
Well, interestingly enough, I always tell people I didn't realize until about 10 years ago that my first introduction was actually as a teenager with my mom. And my mom was suffering through hot flashes, a lot of health issues. And back then, I never even heard the word menopause. In fact, my mother used to call it the change. She didn't even call it menopause, right? And it really wasn't until about 20 years later that I started working in health and fitness with women. And I started noticing a lot of the same like symptoms and things. And they were saying the same thing my mom said. She wasn't getting help. She was just suffering in silence. And I'm like, in this day and age, with all the resources we have, no one could have figured this out yet for what's going on. And at that time, I was actually working specifically in metabolic health, which is about all hormones. It doesn't just specify one. And so I was already helping women alleviate menopause symptoms without even knowing that's what I was doing. So it wasn't until I put two and two together that I realized that it was the changes in life that were happening were affecting all the hormones. And then I said, well, let me learn more about this. And then I started learning more about menopause and my first actual menopause certification, which is interesting, especially since right now there's such a thing about men talking about menopause, was from a man. So, because I couldn't find any education about menopause in the US for someone who's a health coach. You had to be a doctor at that time to get any kind of information. And so that's how I started first getting into menopause. And then I just ended up doing the same thing I was doing with my metabolic health, which is actually what I do now with my menopause clients, because it's the same thing. It's just all about all of your hormones coming into balance together. And I think and we'll get into to that, I'm sure, a lot more later on about how that affects everything. And then I just started getting more education. I found a company in the UK that offered a license and a certification, so I went to them, and ever since then, I went full force into menopause, and that started like around 20. Actually, it was 2020 because that's when COVID happened. And so when we shut down, I just started getting a lot of women reaching out to me through my private practice. And that's how I started just focusing primarily on menopause. And it was when Mr. Menopause was born himself. So I just transitioned from metabolic health directly into menopause health.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for sharing your story. And there's lots of things I wonder about, right? Like what are on your website? It talks about how gender shouldn't prescribe who is able and not able to talk about menopause. And
Mhm.
I agree. Like I fully agree that everybody needs to be part of this conversation because it is something that impacts not just women. And when I say that, I mean are people on the gender diverse spectrum who experience menopause and all of the humans who are around us. Often the language I use is women in a family are generally the ministers of infrastructure. So we create the structure that holds all the things in place, which means how we are functioning has a huge impact on all of those around us. And so a team effort of this is so important. Also wonder, how do women first, when they see you and they hear Mr. Menopause, what is the first reaction that you generally get?
Well, typically, even before that, just the fact that I'm a man, I've gotten some very interesting attacks, and I have to say this as well as a caveat that, like I said, I started doing this work in hormone health and actually in 2001 was when I first started, but then I transitioned into menopause in 2020. So I've been doing this for 2 decades. So, but I was doing it in a private practice. So it wasn't until I started going on social media that I actually started feeling the backlash. So it was odd to me, like, because I hadn't experienced, because women were actually seeking me out prior. So it was odd to be on, and people like saying, you have no uterus, you have no opinion, or hearing a man talk about menopause gives me the ick and all this stuff. And then recently I had a woman say to me, how can a man possibly describe something that he hasn't experienced? And on one hand, I get it. But then on the other hand, I'm like, because I can read. You know what I mean? Because I can pass a test, I can get certifications, and, I can have empathy, I can care, I can actually want to provide this information and these resources. And I always akin it to like this, it's like, women go to men for hair, for makeup, for plastic surgery, for personal training. So it's okay for us to help you with the way you look, but we can't help you with your health. And so it just, for me, it just was like, I really think that it comes from a place of also where there's this, like you were just saying, a lot of times people see menopause as just a woman's health issue. And I always say, the reason that it's not that is because it's a woman's life issue. It impacts her physically, mentally, and emotionally. So that means it's going to impact her social life, her work life, and her home life. And who's in those areas? Everybody, men, women, children, everybody should know and understand menopause. Research has even shown when women are in areas that they're able to open up and talk about menopause without feeling like confined or strained, that their symptoms become less. They feel more confident. It's easier for them to manage things. In the workplace, there's been studies where women who previously wanted to quit their jobs are now thriving because they have the support and the resources. And unfortunately, and I say that especially now here in the US, we live in a very patriarchal society. So you are going to have to get men on your side. Right. And for me, I see myself as someone that can be an easy bridge for that because, first of all, I'm educated, I have the resources, I know what women actually need, but I also know how to talk to men about it because a lot of times women want to share what they want, but men don't hear things the same way. Right. And so men don't absorb information the same way. Like and even like when I got my website, I had a man help me design the website. And then I was like, what is going on? Why aren't people coming to my website? But then I had a woman do a thing and she's like, you don't have enough information. You don't have this. And so I started doing that. My website got flooded. It's just because men, they communicate very differently and I can help
Yes.
bridge that gap.
That's great. There's so many things that I wanna talk about that you just brought up that I think are so important and have been, like, very relevant in my own life recently. So I wonder, and certainly in my own experience, I think one of the challenges about men being in this position at this specific time in our collective history is that we are feeling, by we, I mean women, right? Like, there is this bombardment of, 1, everything is your fault. 2, but you're too dumb to make any decisions about it. And 3, we're going to have to do all of that for you. So we're going to take away all your rights because you don't have the capacity to be able to make your way through that. And so when you are living under that, it's like a preset condition to respond in a way that indicates that your nervous system is activated. Right. So I think that is a lot of what that initial, like, knee-jerk reaction is to seeing a man talk about menopause because we are already activated. And then there's a man's face telling me about menopause. And all I wanna do is scream
Mhm.
because they're just the weight is so unbearable at this time. And at the same time, you bring incredible insight into the process for both men and for women. So my husband and I, when we just got home from a like 2-week road trip, just the two of us. And he and I are great friends. We get along very well, but like that's a long time to spend with just one person, regardless of who it is. And on the drive home, one day we drove for like 14 hours. We were in the car for a long time. And we were having this conversation because I was asking him about like how do we bring men into this conversation more? And he was like, I don't I don't really know because men in general don't particularly want to be like, here, learn about this thing, right? There's a very intentional strategy that you need to be able to communicate with them in a way that makes them want to learn about it that I am not privy to. And so now we have these two things converging, right? Where women are exhausted and angry at the societal construct. And then everything is shifting and changing in our bodies. And we don't know how to communicate with the other humans in our lives about it because their communication strategy is so different from ours. So, where do you start with folks to help bridge this together?
Right. So typically with me, what happens is I always say, I know that there's going to be this friction at the beginning. So I always say, you can just let me in the door and just have a conversation with me. And then you'll see where my headspace is. Because I think that's another thing. One of the things I heard was a woman say, we don't want a man telling us what to do with our body. And I say, I agree 100%, which is why I think education for women is the first line of defense. When you know better, you can do better. And as it relates to menopause, you can live better. It's just about what you know. And the more you know, the easier it is for you to talk about those things with your partner, with your boss at work, or with your coworkers. I've had women go through my program who was having vaginal issues. And I'm like, well, that's part of menopause. So why don't you talk to your husband about it? "Well, I can't talk to him about it." I'm like, "You've had babies with this man. What do you mean you can't talk to him about this?" But there's this thing, but I also think that part of it is in society as well, there's this thing where there is a separation. And I
Yes,
think it's because when people hear menopause, the only thing they think is your period is ending. So what that means is it's a vaginal issue. So men don't want to hear about that, and women don't want to talk about that with men. And that's why I always start with it's more than just a woman's health issue. Like I said earlier, it's a life issue. And so
absolutely.
once we get past that, one of the ladies I told you on that said to me, hearing a man talk about menopause gives me the ick. The video I was talking about was about how to get better sleep. Why does that give you the ick? But it was because she saw a man first rather than listening, she went off the visual. And I think that's the first thing is again, don't judge a book by its cover, number 1, and then number 2, focus on what the person is saying, not who's saying it, right? And that's for both women and for men, right? Because one of the things that I think is a huge problem, even like here in the talks that are happening here, there's some spaces where women are talking about menopause where I'm not even allowed to be in. They won't even let men in the space. Or like a lot of the shows. Oprah had her big thing, which she did a few years ago. The first thing out of her mouth was, men, this is not for you. And if you tell men it's not for you, then they're going to be, well, if you don't want me here, I'm not going to be here. Again, it's how you speak with men. It's about if they feel like if you're telling them this ain't about you, then they're washing their hands of it. But if you invite them in, if make it something where they can be in that space, have one man on the panel if you don't have men on the panel. It's about the inclusion of it all because women want men in the conversation, well, at least they say that, but then they shun them when they come in the conversation.
Yeah,
It's almost like we want you there, but we just want you to listen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 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 yeah. I can totally see that, and I see both sides of this coin, and I think it's one of those things where it is both and. It's not one or the other, right? So, I think that it is important to have spaces for women to just be women and not have to consider, you know, the needs or wants of anybody else and just be able to bleh all the things that we need to bleh. And I think that that's important. And then there's also women who have had sexual violence, who have experienced abuse, who just will not, regardless of how beautiful a human being that man is, they will not feel safe in that space.
Mhm.
And it is not that person's fault. It is an experience of
Yeah.
violence that lives in the body of that woman. So I think those spaces are important. And I also think spaces that include all humans are also really important because, you're absolutely right by saying men, this conversation is not for you. It gives permission to just check out and be like, oh, well, this is not about me. I'm out. And it is absolutely a conversation for men to be a part of. I have a survey where I've been trying to gather men's narrative about what they know, what they wish they knew about menopause so that they can be supportive of the people in their lives who are having this experience. And when I look through the responses, the general theme just is this I just don't know and I have no idea where to go and I feel really uncomfortable in general just trying to navigate. And I have I do not have the language to talk to my partner about it. And I'm afraid I'm only going to make things worse. So, what have you found is effective in inviting men into the conversation and helping them to have the language and feel more comfortable with the conversation?
For me, the thing that I've experienced is that men want to help. They just don't know how, they don't know what to say. I even had a conversation with my brother. He was like, "Man, I don't even know when it's okay to say hi to my wife." You know what I mean? It's like,
Mhm.
he's like, so he's frustrated, she's frustrated, which is also why ARP said that most women file for divorce during their menopausal years. And I think again, it's because there's this lack of communication. The main issue again that I go back to is I really think that it's not menopause is not a sexual issue, right? And I think that's the issue. It's made to seem like it's a sexual thing, or that's why you don't mention talk about it. I don't want you talking about my vajayjay, but menopause is so much. Your vajayjay is one little piece of the menopause puzzle, and it's one out of 1,000 pieces that got to be put together. And most of the time, that's the piece that doesn't need the most attention. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
everything else.
absolutely. I think you made me think about something while you were talking about that as well, but the vagina is not just a sexual organ. Right. It is literally the foundation. It's the floor of our core. And it needs to be healthy and strong so that we don't have organ prolapse, right?
Mhm,
So that we don't. Some of the statistics we're seeing now is that because the vaginal tissue gets so thin and brittle, it's much easier for bacteria to pass through. So women are having recurrent UTIs and dying of sepsis from recurrent UTIs. And so we also need to take away some of the shame and the stigma around that, which I mean is hundreds of years of built up stigma around that. So it's no easy task. But to recognize that that is an organ in our body that needs care,
mhm.
just like our lungs, just like our heart, just like our bones and joints. They all need the same level of care, and we have to be able to talk about it in that way.
Yeah, and you're in Canada, so I don't do you know who Kim Vopni is?
I do not.
So Kim Vopni, she is known as the vagina coach. She's actually
Okay.
one of my Mr. Menopause approved providers that I refer people to. And she may be someone you may want to talk to as well because she talks about how PT, there's physical therapy for your vagina, and those things are all important because it is a muscle, so it is something that you want to keep healthy because it can atrophy, all those things. And during menopause, those things like elevate as well. And one of the other things that I wanted to cover when we were I actually got off the train of thought because we went in a different direction, was when we were talking about having the men in the conversation too, was when the conversation needs to come up. I think that again, we need to just open it up to being able to make it less about it's hard to say this without it coming out wrong, but
Okay, just say it. Got you.
it's not about feelings. You know what I mean? I think the first part about it is the feelings come into place. But my thing is, if you're trying to improve your health, get rid of symptoms, getting rid of all that, you got to move your feelings over to the side because you need to focus on what's going to make you feel better first. You know what I mean? And get your body healthy and vibrant and moving forward. Part of the thing too that I think is an issue is there's also this thing where women say uh, if men experience this, it would be taken care of already. I remember how Halle Berry said that if men were experiencing this, there would be a cure. Well, first of all, menopause is not a disease, so it doesn't need to be cured. That's number one. Number two is that men do go through something similar. It's called andropause. So when people use this thing, well, you see men got Viagra. I'm like, that's not the same comparison, right? You can't do that same comparison. Number one, because Viagra was actually created for the heart. One of the side effects was just that, right? It wasn't like it was studied just for men to be able to, do that. So it's not the same correlation. You know how many men I've interviewed that have told me they were going through andropause at the same time as their wife? They were having hot flashes at the same time, memory losses. But guess what? She's not talking to him about it. He's not talking to her about it. Nobody's talking to each other. So they're suffering in silence separately when they could be nurturing and supporting each other through the process. And again, it
Yes.
just comes through communication. You're asking how I start the conversation with people. First of all, I like to do with my clients who are having those issues couple sessions where we talk about it as a couple so that they, in the parts where they feel uncomfortable talking to each other, as the facilitator, I'm able to ease that to say, look, this isn't what you think it is. So this is what you need to be focusing over here. It's not about that part. Right. What she means is this, you know what I mean? Because he's interpreting something, she's interpreting something. And so you need that kind of conduit. Another thing that I do is I have a thing that's called What Every Man Needs to Know About Menopause. It's a workshop that I do once a quarter where it's just really like, men, you just need to understand this is not just a her problem, right? You know what I mean? This is a we issue that, a society, I believe it's a societal thing because we need it in the workplace. We need it in society as a whole. We need it in the family structure as well. But if you're not talking about it, that doesn't happen. One of the things that I did was I created a program called Menopause Made Simple. And all it is teaching the foundations about menopause in a very, like it's called simple because it's done in a very simple way. It breaks down all of the different types of treatment options, the pros and the cons. And then it walks you through the process of creating your own menopause care plan. So again, it puts everything in the woman's hands. I'm not telling you what to do. You're creating this for yourself, but you get the information and this evidence based information because there's so much crap online right now that's trying to sell stuff, these
Yes.
supplements. And I did a PSA last week and I was talking about the fact that I'm sure you noticed this stream of supplements and probiotics and all these things coming up online right now. And women are falling for it because they're suffering and they want relief. And if they see somebody saying, oh, you can get rid of hot flashes taking this supplement, women are going to try it. I don't know how it is in Canada, but here in the US, supplements are not regulated. So, a lot of these things can interact with other medications you're on. People have gone to the hospital. Some supplements can cause liver failure, all kinds of things. And there's no regulation. So you need to know what you're looking for and you need to have better understanding of actually what's happening in your body so that you're choosing the right thing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I want to skip back to one thing just for
Yep.
a second. Actually, there are a number of really important things you talked about through there, but one the thing about Viagra, I think where that actually comes from is just the frustration that there is so little spent in women's health, right? And research. And so it's a way of articulating that of the frustration of you didn't even start looking at my body in medical trials until 1993. Like I was 16 years
Here.
old before my body was ever even considered in a medical trial. So they think it's important to acknowledge both of those things,
Mhm.
right? That yeah, that it is totally like yes, that is a separate issue and yeah, it sucks that women's health has been the bottom of the priority list for a really long time. And that's why I often find in this conversation about education is so challenging in this time of getting the majority of our information from social media because there is not a lot of room for nuance. And if there is not a conversation that is more nuanced than this one, I don't know what is. Right? Like there is you and I were talking about before. When I facilitate a session, I preemptively, before I say anything else, say, you are going to hear me say more often than not, we don't know. There's not enough data to know for sure. Maybe it might work for you and it might not work for this person. You might have this reaction and this person might have this reaction. We don't really know. And if you are hearing from somebody saying, just do this thing, just take this thing, just do exactly what I tell you to do because it worked for me, run.
Or the heels.
Yes.
Yes,
Or the
run, run,
hills.
run. Yes, yes.
Yes. And
Yeah, I
it's
always said that
so,
that's not medicine. You know what I
no,
mean? Medicine doesn't work like that, right? And one of the things that I always really explain to women is that your menopause experience is going to be unique to you because again, it's a hormonal shift and estrogen works with every hormone, gland, and organ in your body. So if you're someone who goes into menopause and you have a thyroid issue, your symptoms are going to be very different than someone who doesn't have a thyroid issue. If you have chronic digestive issues, your gut actually is a big contributor to estrogen, how estrogen functions. A lot of people don't know that. But if you're someone with a gut issue, again, going back to all these supplements, there's a big barrage of the probiotics out right now. And like you were saying, sometimes it's going to be this, sometimes it's going to be that. I always say, whenever you see a claim on these things, if they don't say something like, for some people, or like you were saying, the evidence is, not clear, or this has helped some women do this. It's really important not to have blanket statements, because if there is a blanket statement, like you said, run for the hills, because they are just trying to get your money. And right now it's really tough to be able to differentiate, because these social things, especially now with AI and everything else, they can make things look really sparkly and shiny, and all these benefits. There's a supermodel right now that's pushing this perimenopause supplement. She's in her 60s. She hasn't been in perimenopause for 40 years. So, but it's part of, the wheel, the big business, right? So it's just do your due diligence, ask the right questions, make sure that it's studied, there's evidence behind it. Don't just follow testimonials, right? You want to see the data. You see the
yes.
research. Have they done studies? And if they have done studies, are there third party studies, or is it just their study? Is it somebody else? Because another thing too, you can see something that says proprietary blend, right? On a supplement. Sounds really fancy, right? But what that means is that they don't have to tell you what's in it. That's what that means. It means it's their proprietary blend. So it's not that it's a great thing, or an ingredient has been researched. That ingredient may have been researched, but if there's four other ingredients in that thing, or if it was researched at 500 milligrams, but what's in your thing is 50 micrograms or whatever, it's not going to be the same. So you just want to follow the data, make sure there's data. Testimonials, again, are great. I use testimonials in my
Me
business
too.
as well. It's great. But I'm also not selling supplements. Anything that's going to go in your body, that's going to change your chemistry. That's another thing. Meditation changes things in your body, changes your chemistry, changes how you digest things, makes your liver have to work harder. Like, there's just so many things. And if you start with food, lifestyle, and activity first, a lot of times you can minimize a lot of those things. You may not even need as much medication as you would have if you had not done those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is another part of the really nuanced conversation that gets lost. So I understand it. Being a woman who is perimenopausal, I understand the reasons why people want just tell me the one thing to do. I am so tired. I don't feel like myself. I look in the mirror and I don't recognize who's looking back at me. Like there are so many layers of this conversation. So I
Can I
understand.
ask you? Can I ask you that really quick though? When you're
Yeah.
when you when you're in that space, like, are you thinking like you wanting to understand what's happening or you just want relief?
So I'm going to answer this question from two perspectives. I personally am a super curious person and I always want to know why. I want to know what's going on. And I also know that when you are a woman who is caring for children, when you are perhaps caring for elderly parents, when you are working full time, when all of these things are happening, you do not have, and then the process that's happening in your body is so energy expensive, you don't have the energy to ask why. And so the just tell me what to do is the literally like the only thing you have energy for. So that's why I always try to think through that perspective and understand it. And it's why what you were saying is so important about education, right? That it's such a difficult place to be because you don't have the energy for the education and to navigate all of the nuance. And so I always have this trepidation when in my sessions, I'm like, okay, so here are the things that we do to feel better. And it's nutrition, movement, sleep, and stress management. And I can just feel the room deflate because they're like, it's
Yeah.
those things again. It's always those things. And I don't have space and time in my life to do it. And
See,
it,
you know, well, I always I have a comeback for that. So if you have
yes,
one,
okay.
so if you get, I have a comeback for that. You eat, don't you? Choose the right things to eat. You move every day, don't you? Choose a different way to move. So you do have time in your day to do the things. It's just about changing what you're doing, right? But the problem is you don't know what to change or how to change it. That's where the education comes in, right?
Yes.
Again, it's like I always say, it's the education is the foundation. And again, too, I always say, how can you possibly know which treatment option, which supplement, which, if you should do HRT or holistic, how are you going to know what to do if you don't know what's happening?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That right
How
there.
are you going to know which thing to choose if you're not even sure what's happening in your body? But
Yes.
foundational information, I don't know how many women have gone through my program who said, I wish I knew this earlier because I thought all these things I was feeling was just me getting old. Right. And that's another thing. There are up to 80 different symptoms of menopause, right? 80. You know,
Um,
you hear about hot flashes, mood swings, and those things, but there's a whole bunch of other ones that are impacting your body. And again, like you're in perimenopause, and that was another thing. Women came to me, they didn't know what perimenopause was. So if
yeah.
you don't know that your symptoms could have started when you were 35. Right. But you're expecting menopause to happen at 50. But here you have been suffering and struggling for 15 years before that when you could have actually been doing things to help yourself. But if you don't know, you can't do.
Yeah, absolutely. I've told this story before, but when I was first getting into this coaching work and learning, doing the coaching certification, I was walking with a friend of mine who is 7 years younger than I am. And so, we were having this conversation. She's like, Lisa, you say perimenopause, and I just tune out. Like, this is not a conversation for me. I was like, so, okay, so let's talk. Tell me a little bit about your daily experience. How are you feeling? She's like, well, I have really low energy and I just don't feel like I used to feel. And I'm having these aches in my ankles. She's going through the list. I was like, sister, turns out perimenopause is quite likely a conversation for you. And it goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning about why this conversation is actually for everybody, right? It is not just for midlife women. It is for, I think about the story you told about your mom. And similarly, I had a conversation with a young man when I was starting out in this work, and we were at a networking event and said, so what do you do? And I said, I'm a menopause coach. And I could see the panic on his face. Like, how do I get out of this conversation? But I give him credit and that he stopped and said, well, what do you actually do? So I started talking to him about, what perimenopause, menopause looks like, how I support women. And his face changed and he said, listening to you talk, I'm realizing that my mom was going through this at the same time I was going through my teenage hormonal fluctuations. And had we known that and be able to talk about it in a different way, our relationship might be different today.
It's so funny you say that because literally that was one of the things that made me go so hard on menopause was after I got the education and I was like, if I had only known what I know now, it wouldn't even, it could have just been because I remember my mom used to go in her bedroom and just stay in her bedroom. And the one moment that I remember is me and my sister were sitting at the dining room table and we kept hearing this noise. It was like, shh, shh, shh. And we're like, what? And so we go knock on my mom's door and then we open the door. Now, it was the middle of a snowstorm because we were snowed in. My sister didn't even live with us, but she had got snowed in with us. And my mom was literally in front of the window with the window was open, literally like a movie. Snow
Mhm.
and wind was blowing into her room. She was in her underwear, paper in one hand, fanning herself, but looked like had just gotten out of a pool. She was drenched in sweat. And that was she was making that sound because she was trying to cool herself off. And thinking back, I'm like, if knowing what I know now, all those times my mom was locked in her bedroom, that's what she was experiencing. I could have gone in and just, you need something, mom. Kids would probably be better with helping out with chores if they knew. Husbands would be more empathetic. Honey, can I get you this? And it's just, again, it's not about the vagina. You know what I mean? That's not what the conversation is about. It's
Yes,
about
yeah,
support. It's about empathy. It's
yes.
about caring. It's about being a support system for someone who's experiencing something. You don't have to completely understand what the person's going through to be there for them, but you at least need to be empathetic. Not up this again, or, because I've heard people say that, and, well, just go outside if you're hot, or, whatever. It's like, well, it's not that easy. She can go outside, she's still going to be hot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
But
absolutely.
again, you just have to know those things.
Yeah, and the impact that that has, right? When I think about it in the workplace perspective, it's one of the things when I'm working with workplaces, it's like let women be able to control the temperature of their workplaces. Because if you are in the middle of, I was a teacher for 20 years. So if you are teaching and you are in the middle of a lesson and you suddenly are having a hot flash, yeah, I can't just abandon my class of 20 kids and go outside, nor can I just start taking clothes off, right? Like there are real factors at play that mean
Yes.
I have to continue walking through my day like nothing is happening. And at the same time, there is a massive renovation happening underneath my skin that nobody can necessarily see.
And one of the things that I often say with my clients, and like you said, there's a little pushback at first, but once they do it, it
Yes.
really empowers them. And what that is, don't hold it in. Say what you're feeling. Say how it feels, because holding that in, that's the suppressing your autonomic
Absolutely.
nervous system. It's, making your mood swings and your fatigue even more because it's also hindering your cortisol levels. So you want to speak it. It's like, what's the worst that could happen? You know what I mean? And oftentimes, actually, there was this study where this woman was having a hot flash and at work, and are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. She go on. But when she had gone through her education and everything and finally realized that she just needed, actually people respected it more when she said, I'm having a hot flash. You know what I mean? So it's this thing where you're in it. So you think, oh my God, I'm having a hot flash, but the people around you, they're not looking at you in that way, even though it feels like that. And again, if the workplace, like you're saying, if the workplace had like even done a workshop where at least every other coworker had heard what it meant, they would automatically be able to be more sympathetic or empathetic, knowing that this stage of life is happening and it's beyond a woman's control as well. It's not something that you can just help. And therapy is not the end all be all. It does not work for everyone. Right. So it's not just about replacing estrogen as well. So it's just really about knowing what's right for you, but most importantly, speak about it. Like, it's going to feel uncomfortable. My client, Darlene, she said, she always thought that menopause had to be something she just had to suck it up and be stoic about. She is so Like, she's a different woman now. She talks about it to women and when she drops off her kids at school. She talks about it to her girlfriend. She said, Tafiq, it has changed everything for me. I'm more confident. I'm not embarrassed about it anymore. I feel lighter. She no longer has the hot flashes because, again, all those things can be triggered by stress as well. Not just
Absolutely.
because it's menopause, stress can trigger those things.
Yeah. And again, nuance in the conversation. The last thing we could clearly talk forever.
Right.
And the one thing I really want to leave the audience with from this portion of our conversation is let yourself receive support. And that is what I kept hearing in my own head as you were speaking. It's such a challenge when you are the person who has been told that your entire identity is wrapped up in being the caregiver. And how much you give of yourself is how much value you are seen to have. And so now we have to receive care. And that can feel very uncomfortable because it's just not something we've done. And sometimes we don't even know how, right? Like that's where one of the places I find challenging is in conversation with women, talking to them about what their experiences are. They're like, well, oh, there's nothing I can do about it. And sort of just throwing up their hands. And I know that so much of that is tied to letting yourself receive. Let yourself receive love and care. You inherently deserve it as a human being, and you have given of yourself for so long. So let yourself receive care. Let yourself receive education. Let yourself receive support and know that that is not diminishing you. It's only supporting you to be like this next version of yourself, which will be even better because you can now then show other people how to receive, which is a really beautiful thing. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today. I really
Can I
appreciate.
say add one thing to your nuance? And that
Yes.
that that is just to say, I believe that menopause is a stage of life where women have the permission to be selfish. I think that it's a time of life when most women, your kids or you're becoming empty nesters, your kids are out of the house, parents are a little bit older if they're still around, but you're able to take that time for yourself, and you have to realize your body is telling you that you need to.
Yes.
Your body is
100%.
literally telling you, you need to focus on you. And there's no reason for you not to. And you need to take care of yourself because that's the difference between living 30 more years and 10 more years.
Absolutely. Yes. Those messages from your body, you need to position them as messages and listen
Yes.
and respond. Absolutely. All of Tafiq's contact information will be in the show notes. So make sure you check that out, connect with him. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to share today?
It just goes back to what we said at the beginning. Listen, menopause is more than just a woman's health issue. It's a life issue, and it affects every aspect of your life, whether it's at home, at work, wherever. And you deserve to be supported. You deserve to feel well. You deserve to have the empathy that you need to go through this process, but you also need to demand.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge with us today. I so appreciate you.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for hanging out with me on Transforming 45. If you laughed, nodded, or had an oh wow moment, hit follow and share it with your favorite midlife human. Find me on Instagram at lboat and keep those transformations coming.
Electric acid.